For a long time, culture has developed and changed in between different places in the world. But what exactly is culture? Edward Taylor said that culture can be a complex whole, which includes knowledge, belief, art, laws, morals, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. Each and one of us are able to perceive culture in many different ways, and we can all apply it to our lives in certain ways. As a student, education might be taken for granted or we don't reflect on its real purpose, but looking at it since the past, education really grew as a whole until the 16th century to the 19th century. Culture silently had an impact on the way education was established because it adapted to what every community believed or rules they wanted to follow. Like uniforms, their different phases like middle school or high school, or the way teachers grade students. All of these past elements and more are different in many regions of the world, and we learn to live through them while we grow as individuals. The first generation of education were created by indigenous culture. However, most educational institutes around the world are founded on European ideals or models. With the pass of time, we can actually acknowledge that in the present, indigenous cultures have been at disadvantage while trying to learn, because of the lack of resources and their system has a lot less basis to guide them on than any other schools. Education in the present is able to grow and continue on because it gives a sense of belonging to students. Said feeling is caused by culture. The history between culture and education varies a lot. The reason being the incredible amount of beliefs and expressions each community has, but some common ground that they can share is the acculturation. Acculturation is a process that refers to changes that take place as a result of contact with people that have different culture than us. Gibson, 2001. Although these changes can take place as a result of almost any cultural contact, acculturation is most often studied in individuals living in countries or regions other than way where they were born, meaning it can relate to immigrants, international students, etc. The terms intercultural and multicultural also develop in between the history of education and culture because in school, for example, over the years we learn about traditions or beliefs from our country. Like in Mexico, we learn about Catrinas or the real meaning behind El Día de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. But we can also learn about Chinese calendars and how they represent elements like luck or wealth with animals. Now, if we wonder how people begin to learn, it's simple. Someone passes knowledge on to us and we do the same thing with others. This is the truth about teaching. Teachers don't necessarily need to be in school. They're everywhere because there's always a new opportunity to learn something wherever we go. Our first teachers ever were our parents or tutors. As we grew that changing to teachers around school or any other system we apply to. We might think the idea of teaching will be gone when we become adults, but the truth is, if we apply to a job or ever want to start a company, someone will be there helping us and showing the correct way to complete our goals. Those are teachers. The education system has underestimated teachers for a long time and it caused conflict, like teachers leaving work or just quitting. We fail to realize that teaching is a cycle and it repeats over the years and generations go by and teachers are the ones that make that possible. With that being said, how can we as adults develop ourselves and become better? In my opinion, this depends on the point of view of every person nonetheless. We can do many things. For example, have an open mind every time we learn. This expands our vision and helps to complete our expectations, which later on it will keep us motivated. Don't overlook people's hard work so we can create a hardened working community. Be respectful. When we talk about culture, the students, we have to create this group of people that truly believe and respect every culture without exceptions. Since we can be so different from many people around the world, as I already mentioned, this can cause many reactions, but we have to aim to a good perspective so no one gets hurt, invalidated, or discriminated in the process. It's inevitable that society will stop changing. However, in the present, we have work to become more accepting of the way one of us is, but we still have a long way to go. Considering that issues like racism, sexism, or any type of social disadvantages are still in our surroundings. The issues that I mentioned might not be something everyone relates to. Even so, turning a blind eye might be as damaging as participating in some of them since it leads to believing that these actions are right and it turns into a normalization of inequality. Finally, diversity is commonly seen everywhere and the way we apply it may benefit our creativity, our productivity. We are able to create a global mindset and adapt ourselves to it. An example of our cultural diversity or difference is language. Language is a big factor when it comes to education. Currently, there are 6,500 languages being spoken all around the world, and all of them portray the way we want to express ourselves, or how we communicate with others, or how we want to be seen. Of course, the idea of living and knowing everything about culture is unrealistic and almost impossible to achieve. But when we experiment and connect with so many different beliefs, we gain experience and we come to appreciate many things in life, which I believe is something very important, such as education. In conclusion, I consider culture and education very different topics, but something we should pursue constantly so that we as individuals and later on the rest of the world connect into one and we all live in peace and come to understand the ones around us.
Culture encompasses religion, food, what we wear, how we wear it, our language, our marriage, music, what we believe in is right or wrong, how we sit at the table, how we greet visitors, how we behave with loved ones, and a million other things. Culture, in many ways, influences our way of living, the way we think, act, and treat other people, and it is passed through generations by celebrations and, most importantly, education. Culture, of course, differs from where you live and even your local community, but they have the same essences of influence and the same process of inheritance. Education goes all the way in history, when our caretakers teach us how to survive in the actual world, whether it's by learning how to write, speak French, learn the piano, or by learning how to maintain a farm. Education is the meaning of no ignorance whatsoever, to be rich in knowledge about the world, to not be a fool when speaking about the future, present, or past, and to know how to communicate and how to most importantly live. Even though the system of education stays practically the same, school has evolved enough to introduce the school system to cultural activities like celebrations, special events, and even breaks so we can spend those celebrations with our family, and by this meaning having cultural interaction between students and teachers. And at the end, we basically implement cultural education. Knowing about your country's celebrations and how they came to be celebrated for the rest of the years is a way to indulge students in cultural education. Teachers have one of the most important jobs of the world because they teach future generations to be better in society and make a better world. And teaching requires so many aspects and abilities like patience, tolerance, and discipline. But teachers must also be adaptive and well known in the culture their students are developing. And the teachers are adapting to them because, as time passes, the modern generations have different ideals and believings and totally not the same as the past generations because nothing stays the same except for the school system, which hasn't changed in dramatic scale since its creation. But if the students of today had changed, why not school? If culture influences everyone and everything, Why has the people and culture haven't changed pretty much anything about school? This is a complete new generation and change is non-stop, and it happens everywhere in the world. If we know that there can be an improvement in these ways of education and we need culture to nutrient the students with knowledge and diversity, we must learn the way of education of other countries and put it into practice without breaking its origins. So teachers need to be aware of the situation and address it. How can they improve? How can they communicate better with students? What other tools can they get to achieve these goals? Teachers are a great influence to their students, and if the teachers make mistakes of mistreating them, students will commit the same mistakes. If a teacher says pink is a color for girls and blue is a color for boys, it can happen one of two things. One is when a student becomes a rebel, where they start to debate with the teacher of how this statement is incorrect, or the students can be silent in their seats, believing that pink is for girls and blue is for boys, which is very funny because that's what school wants you to do: sit silently and obediently do as they say. This is why teachers are so important in all of our lives. They have a very strong impact and they should be valued. Teachers are like second parents to students. We must appreciate them so they can be motivated to do these changes and absorb the newest generation media. Last year in Japan, more than 25,000 people took their own lives. People often cite Japan's long tradition of honorable suicide as a reason for the high rate here. Where we are now, where we live, is so different because we have different cultures, different thoughts, in different situations, so school varies from place to place. Japan has one of the highest levels of education, having extended hours of classes and only Sundays for breaks. But at what cost? Japan teaches their students the values of teamwork and discipline, but they also have very high standards for their kids and even workers. They are in constant stress for meeting deadlines and they can end in burnout. What can we learn from Japanese culture is the values of teamwork and discipline. Pursuing that studying is good and satisfactory. Studying in groups can also help, but if we don't know how to work together, how can we expect to evolve? Pursue teamwork and how to work in teams. That's what we need to learn from Japan, and they need to learn from us that we have a free spirit and way much free time for enjoyment because we're human beings and we deserve it. This is why we need culture interactions, to learn from others and improve our education. That is why culture and education is so important, to learn, to have a diversity, to enjoy it, embrace it, and most importantly, teach the ways of culture influences in school.